Champion, a novel by V. Woods. Episode 1, The Prologue and the Fastest Girl in Florida. Kennedy Space Center, Florida. Launch Complex 39. You have never seen anything move this slowly and mean this much. It weighs 6 million pounds. It sits on 4 double-tracked crawlers, each individual shoe of its track weighing nearly a ton. It burns fuel at a rate that would empty your car's tank in 45 seconds. It employs a crew of 15 operators, 2 drivers, and a team of engineers who walk alongside it the entire journey, monitoring systems you will never fully understand. It's moving at 1 mile per hour, on a good day. With the payload secured and the crawlerway clear and every system reading green, 1 mile per hour, the length of a football field takes approximately 3.5 minutes. The full journey from the vehicle assembly building to Launch Complex 39, 3.5 miles of specially prepared road built for this single vehicle and nothing else, takes approximately 7 hours. 7 hours to travel 3.5 miles. You are watching the slowest operational vehicle in human engineering history. And sitting on top of it, cradled in its enormous arms, secured to its platform, completely dependent on its patience, is the fastest thing human beings have ever built. A machine capable of traveling 17,500 miles per hour. A machine that will leave the atmosphere, that will break every law of the ordinary world the moment it is finally released. It cannot get there without the crawler. It will not launch without first enduring this slow, deliberate, unglamorous road. The engineers call the journey transport. But watch it long enough and you will understand it is something else. It is preparation. It is the diagnostic process made visible. The irreplaceable, unhurried, 1 mile per hour work of making sure that what is being asked to fly has been given every opportunity to be ready. The shuttle does not become capable at liftoff. It discovers at liftoff the full extent of what it already was. This is a story about a woman named Champion. But first, it is a story about the road. Part 1. The Crawler, the fastest girl in Florida.
Pre-launch, diagnostic, origin point. Technical note. The NASA Crawler transporter weighs approximately 2,721 metric tons and moves at a maximum speed of 2 miles per hour unloaded and 1 mile per hour under payload. Before any shuttle is loaded onto the crawler, a complete origin inspection is performed. Each component is traced to its point of manufacture, every weld, every seal. The engineers call this knowing where your parts came from.
There are girls who are born running and don't know it yet. Geneva, Washington was one of them. She grew up in Opelika, Florida, in the kind of household where excellence was expected but not celebrated, where a good report card was met with a nod and a bad one was met with a belt. The distance between those two responses was the only map the children were given for navigating the world. Her mother, Loretta, was a practical woman who had survived enough to be suspicious of anything that looked like joy before it had earned itself. Her father, Raymond, worked the overnight shift at a bottling plant and slept through most of Geneva's early memories of him, a large, quiet shape in a recliner, breathing steadily, present, and unreachable at the same time. Geneva was the middle child of 5. She learned early that the middle was a place you had to decide about. You could disappear into it, or you could make it the loudest position in the room. Geneva chose loud. Not with her mouth, with her body. She discovered at 9 years old that she could outrun every child on her street, not just the girls, every child. The boys who were 2 years older and 6 inches taller, the teenagers who had cars and attitude, and the kind of confidence that comes from thinking the future is already written in your favor. Geneva, Washington could stand at one end of the block, and by the time she reached the other end, the race was over and the verdict was in. And the question wasn't whether she was fast, but whether anyone would ever be fast enough to make it interesting. Her mother noticed. Loretta Washington had raised 5 children on a salary that should have covered 3, and she had learned to notice things. She noticed when Geneva came home 10 minutes later than she should have because she'd been running laps around the school after the bell rang. She noticed when Geneva's shoes wore out faster than her siblings. Not from walking, but from the way she moved, low and quick, pushing off the balls of her feet like the ground was something to escape from. One Saturday in the summer before Geneva's 10th birthday, Loretta took her daughter to the track at the high school and said, "Run!" Geneva said, "Where to?" Loretta said, "As far as you can before I tell you to stop." Geneva ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like water and the world narrowed to the sound of her breathing and the rhythm of her feet hitting the ground and the feeling, which she would spend the rest of her life trying to name. that this was what her body had been designed to do. Not walk, not sit, not stand still while the world happened around her. Run. Loretta let her run for 20 minutes before she called her back. Geneva stopped, bent double, gasping. Loretta said, "Geneva, do you know what it means to have a gift?" Geneva shook her head. Loretta said, "It means God gave you something that most people don't get, and when God gives you something like that, it's a sin to leave it unopened." Geneva looked up at her mother. Loretta said, "You're going to run, for real, with a coach, with a team, and you're going to see how far this goes." Geneva said, "How far does it go?" Loretta said, "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." By her freshman year at Norland Senior High, Geneva Washington was running the 400 meters in under 60 seconds. By her sophomore year, she was running it in 54. By her junior year, she was the fastest girl in the state of Florida, and college scouts were showing up at her meets with stopwatches and clipboards and the kind of attention that made Loretta nervous. A woman named Deborah Ellis, the head track coach at Fort Valley State University in Georgia, watched Geneva run her first 400-meter heat and felt something she had not felt in 15 years of coaching. Certainty. Not hope. Not potential. Certainty. This girl was going somewhere, and the only question was whether Fort Valley State would be part of the journey or whether some bigger school with more money and less heart would get there first. Then she called Fort Valley State, and Fort Valley State called Geneva, and Geneva Washington, who had spent 17 years learning how to be careful, how to be quiet, how to take up exactly the right amount of space for exactly the right audience. Geneva Washington, who was being told by everyone who mattered that she had a future if she just kept running, made a decision that would change the trajectory of her entire life. She said yes. What the stopwatches never captured, what the scouts with their clipboards and their scholarships and their promises could not measure or quantify or predict, was the other thing Geneva Washington carried: the weight of knowing she was going to leave and the guilt of wanting to. Not in the way that gets noticed at Norland Senior High in 1987, where being smart was fine as long as you were also cool, and being fast was celebrated as long as you didn't act like you knew you were better than everyone else. Geneva had learned very quickly to keep that particular gift wrapped. Geneva had learned to smile and nod and say thank you and act surprised when she won, even though she had known from the starting block that no one else in the race had a chance. And so Geneva Washington became known as the fastest girl in Florida, and the thing she carried, the weight of knowing she was going to leave and the guilt of wanting to, remained invisible to everyone except Loretta. Who saw it? Who said nothing? Who packed her daughter's suitcase in October 1987 and drove her to the airport and hugged her and said, "Don't come back unless you've become everything you're supposed to be." She was going to Fort Valley State on a full ride. It was the first time Geneva Washington had been on an airplane. It was the first time she had been more than 50 miles from Opelika. It was the first time she had walked into a room full of people who did not know her name, her family, her history, or the careful architecture of the person she had spent 17 years building. Fort Valley State was small and serious and green in the October light. The campus felt like a secret, tucked between the highway and the fields, insulated by trees and tradition and the specific gravity of a historically black college that had been educating the children of sharecroppers and factory workers and dreamers since 1895. The students moved across the quad with a kind of ease that Geneva recognized as the ease of people who had been told their entire lives that they belonged somewhere, and this was the place. Geneva Washington, who had spent 17 years being careful, who had learned to measure every word and every gesture and every expression for the reaction it might provoke. Geneva Washington, who knew how to be exactly the right amount of everything for exactly the right audience. Geneva Washington walked onto that campus in October 1987, and for the first time in her life, she exhaled. She met a boy named David who danced well and listened when she talked and did not seem to need her to be smaller or quieter or less than what she was. She met girls who ran slower than she did and did not resent her for it. She met professors who called her Miss Washington and expected her to have opinions about things she had never been asked to have opinions about before. And she ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in Florida. She ran like the future was a finish line she could see. And then, in the way that futures collapse when you are 17 years old and convinced that you have finally figured out how to navigate the world, everything stopped. Next, episode 2, the installation.